In the center of the planet, there sleeps the great Earth Dragon, a being of incomprehensible might. So immense is his power that even his dreams change the world, granting special individuals on the surface extraordinary powers beyond those of mortal men. This is the Earth of the Mirage universe, and you're listening to the Mirage Barrage. The black smoke curled up from the Stormbreakers base. Reynold Ringer watched the other heroes as they gazed from above at the cracked shell. From their returning jet, they had a fantastic view of the stricken base in the North Atlantic. But Ringer's eyes did not linger on the cracked carcass of the base. No, he could see that despite the acrid smoke, much of it was untouched. The conference room at the top had been shattered, which made the damage quite visible, but the structure, the majority of the artificial island, that was just fine. His eyes instead wandered to his companions, to their faces, and their expressions of shock, and something else. Over his nearly 600-year lifespan, Ringer, the super known as Renaissance Man, had felt the same sense from many others. The Stormbreakers felt much the same as the German princes did when Louis XIV crossed the Rhine and began the 9 Years' War, how much of Europe felt when Prussia attacked Saxony in the 7 Years' War, the Spanish when Napoleon turned on them in the Peninsular War, just before the Fifth Coalition War, the Americans after Pearl Harbor in the Second World War, and so on, all across history. Shock, devastation, outrage, the growing desire to fight. Perhaps not as strong as in wartime, but he felt it nonetheless seep into the hearts of the Stormbreakers, and it set him on edge. Even as they landed, saw the damage was hardly debilitating, and realized there were very few casualties, it didn't matter. They had been struck in their base of operations, in many ways in their home. Reynold Ringer didn't look to see what had been done. He looked to what hadn't. Sekhmet Scion was completing the assessment of the damage, and leading the effort to repair and recover. Dauntless Dynamo was zipping back and forth throughout the base, reporting back more and more information. Too much. The useful details had already been noted. He was just burning energy, the unstable, irrepressible nervous energy bubbling up from within. Kid Cosmos was stubbornly trying to help move rubble, despite his injuries, and Crystal Crusader was trying to shut him down, his crystal spirit taking over the heavy lifting. Psychurge was damaged and still healing, and simply looked on helplessly. No man was nearby, checking the support personnel for injuries. Renaissance Man spoke to a tall blonde man who had seen most of the attack. And they didn't go back in this submarine? No, he answered, puzzled. I didn't see what happened to it after they swarmed out. They were all in black, but with these carved gray masks like demon faces, and they had guns. I didn't really pay attention to the submarine with them running around, but I saw them leave. On one of the boats. Yeah, like I said, after they must have planted the bomb, some of our guys got them cornered for a bit, and they managed to get to the dock, grabbed a boat, and tore off. That's when the bomb went off. Some of your men fought them off? The unaugmented, not the supers, did this. The man stiffened. Just because we don't have powers doesn't mean we don't serve, and it doesn't mean we can't kick some invaders in the tail. I don't think that's what Renaissance Man meant, No Man interjected from behind. I'm sure he didn't mean to insult your capabilities. Hardly, he agreed roughly. I'm insulting these invaders' incompetence. The man didn't look assuaged by that remark. In fact, he looked all the more outraged, but No Man quickly calmed him by excusing Renaissance Man and himself. The two supers walking together, No Man commented, For arguably the most human of us all, you are quick to dismiss the actions of non-supers. Stick around a while, Renaissance Man growled. You see enough of people and they stop being terribly impressive. But that wasn't ingratitude. Was it not? I know just as well as you that most of what we accomplish would be impossible without ordinary people doing the legwork. But stop looking at them a moment and consider the enemy and our other supers. The Stormbreakers didn't operate as the only supers within their organization. They had several supporting superpowered individuals that provided backup, supporting services normal humans couldn't, and guard duty. But when the attack of these mysterious demon-masked people occurred, none of their powers worked. The ability to cancel out another's power is very rare, but not unheard of, No Man said, trying to follow Reynolds' logic. Just as the great Earth Dragon gives us our powers, it can take them away, and by the same token, someone could gain the power to take them away. Yes, that's no mystery. though it may narrow the suspect list. Diego rushed by. "Baddies can cancel powers, doing a search," he blurted as he went to check the archives. "But think about what that implies," Reynolds continued, ignoring the speedster. "They came prepared, and they had a plan." And yet, their forces were unprepared to actually destroy the base. They only brought enough explosives to really damage the control room, and then they got cornered by conventional forces and had to retreat. "It is no secret that this base is home to supers," No Man mused. "Even a low-rate tactician could see the decided advantage of taking someone who could cancel out our powers. The presence of such an individual or individuals does not mean the perpetrators had a well-developed plan." Except they got here in the first place. This island has spotters that can see for miles, radar, sonar, nearly every scanner conceivable, and a myriad of long-range defenses. Yet they got through that no problem. "That would take a great deal of preparation," No Man conceded. Reynolds was glad he was talking to him about this. No Man always had a cool head, and if he could get him to see what he saw, he might have a chance at the rest. "And resources," Ringer continued. "To get that much resources, you would have to be a very powerful individual." "Griffin, the High Mentor? I can think of several," No Man offered, but wasn't convinced himself. "Or it's a group, and a group is going to have someone point out the insanity of dumping resources in a venture to get to the Isle without any plan of what to do once they reach it." "I see why you say it's odd," No Man said pensively, "but I do not see what conclusion you are drawing." "I don't know yet," Ringer admitted, "but something's wrong here." They had found themselves back at the docks, a large room open to the sea, half flooded with the ocean. The rest was the loading and boarding walkways, cranes, and other machines. It had been the site of the final confrontation, and had taken some damage, as well as some casualties. Sekhmet Scion was standing in one of the boats, a fast, high-tech interception craft. She was next to the helm, talking to its driver and gesturing at a map screen. Or she was, until Renaissance Man and No Man walked up. "What's wrong?" she asked to Ringer. "Something about this attack is off. It feels like misdirection," he said. "Strange," Scion said. "I was thinking about misdirection as well, but I was thinking back to the missile." "Such as how the missile appeared to be misdirection for the theft of the Soviet device?" Sekhmet Scion nodded grimly. "It seems they also used it as misdirection to perform this assault." Renaissance Man shook his head. "No, I can't agree. That's stretching it too thin." Rashida raised an eyebrow, but waited for him to go on. "I don't think the missile was just misdirection. You don't try to steal an ICBM as a pure feint. I have to believe that on some level they wanted it to launch. They just had a backup plan as well. If we and the commissars kept fighting much longer or knocked each other out, the missile would launch, and that would be the end of the world. You don't risk something like that unless you want it to happen. Besides, pulling off that and a heist from the Soviets is challenging enough. Adding a third layer with an attack on our headquarters is a ludicrous amount of effort." "Or perhaps not," No Man said. "You noted the apparent flaws in that plan, but perhaps you have also just explained them. Those responsible were attempting 3 impossible tasks at once, and perhaps the effort and resources needed was stretched too thin." Just then Diego rushed up to them. He looked tired all of a sudden, as if he had skipped 2 days of mentally processing and had gone from outrage to exhaustion. "I can't find any supers with power negation on the loose, unless you count Cypher." "We don't," Sekhmet Scion and Renaissance Man said in unison. Diego nodded to the ceiling as if to say, "Well, yeah, I knew that." Then he continued, "So I got nothing. I've got every super that every cooperating government and even some less cooperative governments have ever encountered or heard of on my list, and there's absolutely nothing, zilch, nada. Power of nullification is so rare it should be shining like a bright beacon, but instead—" "It's all right," Sekhmet said soothingly. "No one is blaming you. Remember, these people have sabotaged Earth's premier starship, nearly assassinated the president, practically stole an ICBM, and infiltrated a no-doubt top-security Russian vault. If they weren't top secret, I'd be more surprised." "If you can call this top secret," Renaissance Man muttered. Diego had relaxed slightly, but now looked up towards Ringer. His tired eyes were portals to the gears slowly clicking in his mind. "What's that supposed to mean?" No Man stepped in. "Reynolds believes there may be more to this than what there appears to be." "Like what?" Diego asked, genuinely curious. I haven't worked that out yet, Renaissance Man admitted again, but I have a hard time believing this was the same group. Diego's face flicked from astonishment to incredulity to outrage. You think there's another super-secret group out there that we can't find? Maybe, but I'm not saying anything yet. I'm saying there's a piece missing from the puzzle. Like what? Ringer tried to get Diego up to speed, but he wasn't having any of it. No man had been patient and considerate, at least hearing out Renaissance Man. Dynamo, however, was in no mood for another of the old hero's conspiracy theories. That's it? That's all you have to go on? Our guys won, so something must be wrong. That's an oversimplification. We haven't even found out who they are, and you're doubting if it was them? That's a good point, Diego, Rashida interjected. We don't know who is responsible yet, so why don't you keep looking for clues as we clean up? If Diego saw this as an obvious dismissal, he didn't show it. He seemed to take heart in the task, even though he had basically already been doing it, and zipped off. I'm not crazy, Renaissance Man said to the leader of the Stormbreakers. I don't think you are, she said guardedly, but we really are short on information one way or another. But we might have something. She gestured towards the map on the boat. The attackers escaped on one of our boats. When they attacked, they used an EMP to knock out the electrical systems, so we have no sensors on which way they went, but Hendrik here is quite confident he knows their bearing. Hendrik, the operator of this particular boat, nodded. I'm eyeballing it, so there'll be some error, but I saw them leave from my perch in the upper floors. Got a good view compared to where I was standing on the edge of the base, so I punched that in here. He gestured towards the navigation console, and this is what I get. Ringer glanced at the line before stating, You know that if they had any sense they wouldn't head straight back for their base. They'd go one direction and then change when out of visual range. I do know, Rashida replied. Look again at that course. Ranald did so. It was an easterly course, headed towards the Mediterranean. Are you saying we flew over them? He asked. There's a chance, Rashida said carefully, trying to keep the hope out of her voice. Kid Cosmos, finally driven off by Crystal Crusader, jogged up to the others. What's this about you cooking up some conspiracy theory? He demanded of Renaissance Man. Diego, that gossip, Ringer cursed. By now everyone would know. Well, is it true? No, it's not a conspiracy theory. Oh, great. I can't wait to hear this. Conspiracy theories are often ridiculous because of their assumption large organizations can pull off nearly anything. I'm suggesting they can't. That it was some other group that hit us. Oh, I see. It's not insane because you think one group is behind all these attacks. No, you think that there are two groups, one of whom just happened to know what the other was doing so well that they could take advantage of it and also do the impossible. Far more rational. Calm down, Renaissance Man warned, having the opposite effect. Rashida stepped in, again. He's just bouncing ideas off of us. No one has come to any conclusions. Isn't that right? She directed the last at Ringer. Right, he said. Psychurge drifted in, his green cape holding his damaged body aloft. It was slowly repairing itself, the back mostly healed, but the limbs were still quite shattered. It was strange to watch, as despite the severe injuries, he was held perfectly upright as if nothing were wrong. I am told Renaissance Man has a theory, he said. Dynamo, I swear, Reynold began. Scion cut him off. Since we're all here, we might as well go together to the jet. To Psychurge, we may have a lead. Tell Crusader. Psychurge nodded. It is done. Crusader didn't meet them at the jet, but told them to go on ahead. So they did. It only took moments to call up the sensor logs. It took a bit longer to scrub through everything. But eventually, there it was. Almost back at the base, they had nearly passed over one of their own stolen boats. It was practically invisible to anyone who might have looked out over the window at the time, but the sensors had no problem spotting it. And it had changed course from what Hendrik had noticed, heading more south than east. They tracked its course, extended the line outwards, plotting where it would go if it continued on this way. Cape Verde, Sekhmet Scion noted. The archipelago west of Africa was a little-known nation, an offshoot of Portugal. The Portuguese were its first human inhabitants in the 15th century. It was in an excellent spot to take advantage of shipping lanes, and yet conveniently discreet. Got him, Kid Cosmos said, grimly triumphant. Assuming they didn't change course, No Man noted. Seems unlikely they just happened to pick this heading, Diego countered. It would be quite a coincidence if they weren't heading right there. Unless it's a diversion, Renaissance Man said. For a moment, he could see a look of exasperation on Sekhmet Sion's face. Not for what he said, but that he'd said it. Like a mother dealing with a stubborn child. Nothing is good enough for you, is it? Diego said accusatorially. I find it coincidental that we just happened to spot them on their new course. So instead, they must have deliberately gone off in one direction just so we could find them, and then, just before we could spot them, they picked a new course. I thought you said this wasn't a conspiracy theory, Kid blurted. Before the argument could escalate, Psychurge held up his one good hand. Wait a moment, he said, then connected them to the psychic network. Found something, Crusader was saying. We're all listening, Sion prompted. Go on, tell us again. Better if I show you, Crusader replied. And then the Stormbreakers all saw a detailed image of something in Crystal Crusader's glove. A ring. Left behind during some of the fighting, he explained. He turned the ring so they could see the pattern that etched itself all around the silver loop. At first it looked like a snake, but as the ring turned, they saw thin, retracted wings along its body, and then clawed feet until they saw the head right next to the tail, the body having wrapped all the way around. It was a dragon. The Great Earth Dragon, No Man suggested. Just like the thing they stole from Russia, Kid said. It would fit. That was supposed to connect to the Great Earth Dragon too, right? Diego agreed. Are we suggesting this group reveres the Great Dragon? Rashida interjected skeptically. I would, Crusader said. The Great Earth Dragon gives us and many others power. Why would someone who admired it want to wipe out the Earth? Someone who worshipped it, Crusader commented cautiously, may want to wake it. Silence. Diego was piecing it together slowly in his head. If it can see into our heads to give us power, he reasoned, working out the twisted logic, then if everyone suddenly poofed out or felt pain, it would be one hell of an alarm clock, Renaissance Man finished the thought. Renaissance Man and Sekhmet Sion stood outside on the same level as the broken conference room. You think this is a trap? Sion asked. Everyone wants to climb into the jet and fly off to Cape Verde at once. I don't like that, Renaissance Man replied. I'm listening. It doesn't fit. It looks like they are some sort of dragon cult, and everything they've done up until now makes sense in that context. But what does attacking our base get them? Sion shrugged. Perhaps they wanted to get us out of the way. It was a terrible plan in that case. They did mildly well against our support personnel, if you're generous. But they wouldn't last a moment against us. You know that. Rashida didn't agree immediately, instead saying, they had nullifiers with them. You know that too would only help so much. It was true. Nullifiers prevented the use of powers gained through the Great Earth Dragon, but 2 of their members didn't get powers from him. Kid Cosmos had powers because of his Ashvelian biology, and Crystal Crusader got his from his Crystal Spirit. A mysterious alien being that all Crystal Crusaders had across the galaxy. There was a core crystal cove in which many thousands more dwelt, cared for by alien keepers. The astonishing powers of the Crystal Spirits led many to think that they were actually one of the old gods, just like the Great Old Dragon, only broken into thousands of fragments. Whatever the case, a nullifier from Earth would have no effect on them. And they would have limited effects on other members of the Stormbreakers. Renaissance Man himself was prevented from aging, so while a nullifier would allow him to start aging once more, it couldn't erase the centuries of practice and knowledge that made him so dangerous. In fact, for all intents and purposes, he would be entirely ineffective. It wasn't like all of the years would suddenly catch up to him. He had carefully tested this with Cypher before. Dauntless Dynamo would be most effective, as virtually all of his combat ability was based around his power. Sekhmet Sion and No Man had some expertise in hand-to-hand combat, Sekhmet also having over a century of experience under her belt. They would be dramatically less effective, but not useless. Psychurge was an interesting case. His psychic powers would be completely useless, except for his connection to his body in the spiritual plane. Despite the spirit world also likely having been created by the Great Earth Dragon, nullifiers were strangely ineffective against it. One would think that they could just erase the plane from existence with their powers, but it was strangely not so. as Sykerge's connection to his crystalline form was spiritual in nature, it wouldn't be cut, so he could still use the hardened body, and the green cape would let him fly. Once again, his main asset would have been removed, but he still had a couple of tricks left. All in all, bringing a few nullifiers against the Stormbreakers would certainly have an effect, and basically have their powers. But the attackers who the support personnel faced would have been petty fodder for even the halved Stormbreakers. Okay, it doesn't make sense, Rashida agreed, based on what we know at least. I don't see how it ever could, Ringer insisted. We react to situations, it's what we do. A situation arises, and then we solve it. But no situation and we can't do anything. If they didn't attack, we would still have no clues to work with. Are you saying you have an idea of how to be proactive? Yes. Go on. We think this is a secret organization. A cult. That's how it appears. We both know the best way to get information on that world is through someone else already living in it. Scion closed her eyes and took a careful breath. This was something only the two of them could do. I don't like this. It's going to take some time. Someone's playing a game with us. Let's not make the wrong move. Let's get ahead of it. We might not have time to do that. From all appearances, there's an omnicidal cult out there who has just stolen equipment to directly connect them to the Great Earth Dragon. We're on the clock. And if this is a trap, charging in blindly will do nothing. If you really want to charge in, fine. But I'm checking this out. No, you're not. If these cultists have nullifiers, you need to be there. Look, one of us has to check out these secret societies. Are you volunteering? Rashida mulled it over in her head for a long minute. The other 5 will head towards Cape Verde. Keep an eye on things and report back any cult activity they see. If things go south, at least they have Kid and Crusader there. And you? We get one shot at this. No chasing rabbits. So you'll talk to your people, I'll talk to mine. And then the team regroups. Understand? Renaissance Man didn't like it, but he knew this was the best he was going to get. Understood. It hadn't taken long for Sykerge to sense the strange activity happening on Fogo, an active volcanic island in Cape Verde. It was almost certainly the cult. Strangely, they seemed buried into the mountain. A few surveillance passes and they discovered something extraordinary. The volcano was no longer active. It would have taken a geological event of great magnitude to have changed this naturally. It appeared the cult had more power than they first thought. Renaissance Man listened to all of this and absorbed it quickly as he traveled to Verona. It appeared there was some legitimacy to the clues carefully laid out for them, but that hardly quelled Renaissance Man's paranoid mind. If he had been in charge of a trap, this is how he would have laid it out, never making it seem too easy. A ring, a vital clue left behind, that could only make sense in a struggle, and a ship pointing to the ambush location wouldn't set off right away towards it, but must appear as if it were caught doing so. And of course, an ambush is made all the better if you trick your opponents into thinking it is they who are doing the ambushing. No, Renaissance Man was far from convinced. In the old city, Reynold Ringer removed his mask and costume and instead chose a simple suit before heading to the meeting place. It wasn't an old building, but it was one carefully designed to appear pleasant next to the beautiful old architecture. It was 3 stories tall and almost unremarkable when squashed next to the other buildings. A simple but secret handshake was all that was needed to be invited inside. "Good morning, how may I help you?" the man inside asked in Italian. "I seek rest, for I am weary. Where might I lay my head for the night?" Ringer responded fluently. "There are many places to sleep I can recommend, though no place can quiet that which dwells within you. My mind is never quiet, though my lips always are." "Perhaps you would like something to drink while you consider. Would you prefer water, wine, or tea?" "Wine is not for the day, and water whets my appetite." "Come then, let us talk in the next room." The man brought him into the back room, and Reynold Ringer performed a few rituals and subtly altered things in the room, such as pins on a map, until he passed through 3 more highly ranked members of the society. Finally, he was led into a room on the highest floor in the back, where the head of the lodge was standing next to his desk. A thin man with long dark hair, he didn't appear all that imposing. When Ringer entered, he smiled slightly. "Welcome, brother. What can I offer someone such as yourself? It's rare we see someone of your considerable rank here." "I need information," Ringer said, skipping the formalities now that he was at the top. The other man took the hint. "What is it?" "Tell me about the cult of the Great Earth Dragon." The other man scowled. "It is a recent organization. It was founded in the 1930s by some American archaeologist, and it's unfortunately popular. Those within it think they have come to a more scientific and enlightened understanding of God, believing that all other conceptions of religion were at best warped reflections of the Great Earth Dragon and at worst pointless superstition. They claim to have evolved beyond religion and morality. In terms of religion, that is a blatant lie, as they frequently steal elements of other faiths and incorporate it into their worship of the Great Earth Dragon. They have priests and prophets, all right. As for morality, they may have abandoned that. The cult has been gaining strength since the 1970s, when the movement began to believe that the highest good was the awakening of the Great Earth Dragon. Some initially believed it was fine just to let things happen on its own, but the prevailing notion quickly became that it was best to find a way to speed the process. The man pulled a book of blank paper from one of the several bookcases and laid it open on his desk, drawing several symbols, including that of a dragon biting its tail in a circle, not dissimilar to the symbol that ran around the ring they had found. They also tend to worship heroes as if they were saints, though they never confront them. They have a distaste for plain humanity and think it better to only discuss their beliefs and dreams amongst themselves. They feel no attachment to humanity as a whole. The man looked up. "They haven't been active recently, have they?" A spark of knowledge flashed behind his eyes. An extremely high-ranking member of the society just happened to visit, asking about these people after a series of dramatic attacks. He could put the pieces together. "If they have," Ringer answered cryptically, "who would have moved against them?" The man sized Ringer up for a moment. "There may be someone else," he admitted. Underneath the drawing of the dragon eating its tail, he began another. "The Ouroboros, of course, has many meanings. Adopted by these dragon cultists, the image of a dragon, rather than a snake, eating its own tail suggests they view it as a symbol of divinity, probably related to rebirth, the cycle of life. This ties into their belief in the rightness of waking the dragon as the next step in the cycle." Then he slashed upwards with his pen and drew a sword, stabbing through the new dragon. It reached from the bottom of the circle through the top and stabbed through its head. "We have seen this symbol, too. A sword cutting through the holy symbol of another clan. Not too difficult to see what it means," Reynolds noted. "No, it is not. Except the sword points upward. It suggests the wielder is looking up or aiming high. They are not striking down from above, but rising up. It is not a symbol of power, but suggests their own group is weak. It is a strange thing to gather round. But I suspect it might mean that those who use it view the path upward as long and difficult and the essential journey of life, and that the dragon stands in their way. That it makes them weak, so they must destroy it, meaning they are likely human, anti-supers, and probably extremely subtle creatures at that." Ringer thought he could have gleaned most of that information from simple induction, without the speculative symbology, but he said nothing. "It's also unlikely to be used in vandalism of the dragon cult's symbols. It isn't decisive enough to be an effective insult, so they are not likely traitors within the cult, but an entirely outside force, and they hate direct confrontation." "They'd use others." "Certainly. And how would one find them?" "I think I may know someone," the other man said. "I could arrange something." "How soon?" "All things considered, at once." But there was something else. The man stepped around the desk and produced a wide goblet and a small knife in one hand. He set them on a small nearby table and looked towards Ringer. "We have only met briefly, and it does little good for two of our members, especially at our level, to be unfamiliar and apart. Let this be the start of a friendship." He handed the knife towards Ringer, handle first, and waited. Ringer took it carefully, considering. He wanted that ritual. For them to swear loyalty to each other by each pouring some of their blood into the goblet. Ringer thought before carefully answering. Very well. He let the red drops fall into the goblet carefully. The other man watched, extremely intently. Ringer cleared his throat. He was holding the knife, handle first, for the other man to take and complete the ritual. With an apologetic smile, the other man did so. As they wrapped each other's wounds, the other man said, "His name is Trevor Layton. I'm not sure, but he's definitely part of a society. His personality would fit as one of the anti-dragon cultists, but as I said, I can't prove it. He's reclusive and manipulative, currently lives in Munich. I can provide the details." Ringer nodded and accepted them. He stopped at the door. He considered whether or not to say anything. Then, "You might find answers best left alone." "I'm prepared for either result." Reynolds had been right. So it can be done, even mixed like that? He still hadn't turned back to the other man, but he could sense him pick up the goblet. "It is very difficult, but you just need the right cells, and they'll know which ones are mine. If you knew, why did you go through with it?" Reynolds didn't answer his question. "How many others know?" "None about you specifically. But there are a couple of rumors. Why don't you just come back?" "It's better that we don't associate. I don't mix well with family." And with that, Reynold Ringer, as he was now known, slipped out of the room, leaving his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson alone once more. Rashida gazed at the disorder as she slowly walked in. Scars and black gouges traced their way across the walls and pillars, and broken bits of stone were scattered across the floor like powder. Suddenly, two of the guards swung out from behind the wrecked pillars and crossed their spears in front of Rashida. The two women, faces partly hidden under hoods, nonetheless clearly glared at her. "Why?" one asked. "Why did you do this?" I am not responsible for whatever happened here," Rashida said, trying to put some authority into her voice, but this place always sapped a bit of her strength. "You lie," the second guard said. "Who else knew about us and hated the legacy as much as you?" Rashida's eyes grew hard. "I have always left you in peace, no matter our differences of opinion. We have worked together before. I had no reason to attack you. That is what happened, isn't it?" "By supers," the first guard said again. "Which again leads us back to you." "Supers attacked you?" Rashida asked, suddenly getting a bad feeling. "What kind of supers?" The two guards glanced at each other, unsure of how to respond, but reverence kicked in. They all had the same power, to cast ropes of energy. Some that burned, some that pushed. "All the same?" "Yes," the other answered. "What did they take?" Rashida was starting to panic. A pained expression on the guards' faces. "Everything." Rashida turned on her heel and briskly strode out of the room, hitting her comm as she did. "Stormbreakers, group up now. We have to move. That means you, Renaissance Man." "Renaissance Man, do you read?" Sekhmet's voice came through the comm again. Renaissance Man, standing over Trevor Layton's unconscious guards within his apartment, cut off the comm before Sekhmet Scion could say that the dragon cultists had stolen a second artifact directly connected to the Great Earth Dragon's power. Renaissance Man picked up the little fair-haired man off the floor and pressed him against the wall. "Well," he asked again, "were you responsible for the attack on our base?" To his credit, Trevor, despite sweating and swallowing, didn't let his voice tremble. "It was the only way to get you on the trail of the Dragon Clan." "And that's all you want? To stop the Dragon Cult?" "Yes." "I don't believe you. Societies like yours don't just start because you hate someone else. You have to have something more in common. What are you holding back?" "Nothing. We realized the cult of the Earth Dragon was making their move, and they had to be stopped. We're not a bunch of soldiers, so we just steered you in the right direction. It didn't hurt that we'd be sending in supers, those touched by the Great Earth Dragon, into harm's way. No offense." "You hate supers?" "Hate? No. We distrust. Like I said, you were touched by the Great Earth Dragon. So that's your core principle, hatred of the dragon? Preventing it from waking, yes. Why? How does that bring you all together? If I may, have you really thought about what it is that's lurking in the center of our planet? Everyone assumes this almighty beast must be a force for good, because it's produced you supers. He cocked an eyebrow at his current predicament. The dreams of the dragon make heroes, and its nightmares make villains, right? That's how the line goes, anyway. But how do we know we don't have that backward? How do we know that the heroes aren't the nightmares to the dragon, and the villains are its fantasies? How do we know that it even cares one way or another about those who live on the surface? It is a god. What are we to it? If it wakes, perhaps it will leave us in peace, but perhaps not. Perhaps it will simply stretch its wings, leave continents scattering to the stars with its waking movements, and its consciousness destroy our minds as it becomes aware once more. What will you see? What will you feel when reality falls apart around you? Renaissance Man considered Trevor Layton's words carefully. Some things we shouldn't meddle in, and some things should be left sleeping, Layton said gravely. Renaissance Man pressed him to the wall again. The cult of the dragon. It's really on Fogo. Stopping them, even destroying them, is all we ever wanted. So yes, as I said, I didn't think you'd find them without a nudge in the right direction. Now that you saw through our deception, I almost wish we hadn't gone to the trouble of making it. Because now, you're here, instead of there. Renaissance Man dropped him and strolled back to the shattered window. Securing the rope, he rappelled back down to the street. He had been right, but it had cost them time. The painful realization hit him that even though he had been proven absolutely correct, it might have been better just to have ignored his instincts this once. He had to regroup with the others. Soon. The Stormbreakers launched down towards the island of Fogo in standard formation, no man first. It had taken precious hours to gather the team back together, hours they scarcely had. Once landed, they immediately charged towards the secret entrance into the bowels of the volcano, long since identified by Psychurge and Crystal Crusader from their observance from above. They burst in, and immediately, as anticipated, the cultists inside shot forth several tendrils of energy. One way or another, the worshippers of the Great Earth Dragon had found a way to summon its power in a highly specific way. Each of them had learned to create these threads of energy, as Sekhmet Scion had discovered. Fortunately, they were prepared. Dauntless Dynamo shot past the first wild shots and immediately took down those guarding the entrance. As the team burst into a larger chamber, a dozen more cultists fired ethereal strands, these weaving together with practiced ease, like a living net threatening to engulf the Stormbreakers. Crystal Crusader's spirit leapt out, fused with a large chunk of rock, and lifted it into the shape of a wide, powerful golem. A golem that let the energy net wrap around it, protecting the Stormbreakers. They shot around the golem and took out these cultists as well, bursting further and further into the complex. Psychurge led the way, scanning their minds for the right direction, calling out when reinforcements were on the way. Crystal Crusader with shield and golem blocked the coordinated attacks, while Dauntless Dynamo took the cultists out. Kid Cosmos smashed through locked blast doors and any other hard structure in their way. When they came across untrained cultists who had grabbed guns and started firing, No Man simply held up a hand and stopped the bullets in their tracks. And finally, Sekhmet Scion and Renaissance Man directed the chaos. Rashida focused more on coordination, while Reynold looked for any nullifiers that might appear. But none did. They burst into the main chamber, a large excavated cathedral of rock and metal with a domed ceiling. And then, they felt pain. They were trapped in mid-stride, all having burst through the large double doors at once. A force had captured their motion and halted it in time, causing them to remain completely still, caught in an invisible field. But it wasn't like No Man's power. No, this was power itself. Raw channeled power that tore at every molecule of their bodies. An unprecedented control that allowed for no movement and hardly any thought. And standing before an altar at the back of the chamber was a priest in bright red robes with bright white trimming, round spectacles over his freckled black face, and his one raised arm encased in dark metal, an iron fist. Connected to it was a large machine, Soviet in origin, that channeled energy directly from the great Earth Dragon into his hand. They had been too late. The plan was in motion, and the cultists had been ready. Caught in an unbreakable field, too late to ambush the cult of the Great Earth Dragon, how will the Stormbreakers escape? Can the cult truly awake the mighty beast that sleeps within the Earth's core? And if they can, what will it do? All this and more next time on the Mirage Barrage.